Alright, the title is pretty accurate, and I'm definitely about to clown on Diablo 4 kind of a lot, but that being said, people can enjoy and play whatever they want to. It's not a bad game, strictly speaking. There are good parts, I'll try to also make sure to mention those, but every time I play Diablo 4, I catch myself thinking more than once every single session, why is it like this, and why don't I just go play Path of Exile? For starters, this is a $70 game with microtransactions. I want everyone to remember that as I go deeper into the review because that matters. $70 with expensive microtransactions. Cool, fun. Maybe you don't care, but why don't I just play Path of Exile then? Unlike Diablo 4, it's free, and with $70 I can buy plenty of discounted cosmetics and utility items of which there are more and better than Diablo 4. Great start. In the background right now, there's some footage of a rogue I started leveling, but it's not exactly where I want it to be just yet. Long way to go, of course. I really do enjoy the gameplay at times, so it's easy to get sucked in and keep playing dungeons for like one continuous session, but the reason I play games like this, really boiling it down to the absolute minimum, is to make character builds and get loot. Games like Diablo 4 are fundamentally about those two things, builds and loot. What you get for loot determines how you can build, and how you build determines how fast and how much you can get for loot, and if you can ascend through the difficulties and continue to get the better loot. It's a binary cycle, and it's pretty fun. Diablo 4 pulls it off acceptably well. Genuinely, it does. But when you look at these two systems apart from each other, and then look at the ways that they interact with one another, things kind of start to unravel. Diablo 4 progression basically goes like this. What you do from level 1 to level 60 doesn't really matter. That's just leveling. 60 or 70 to like 90 or so is mid-game, and after that you get towards end-game. Some people have different definitions of early, mid, and late game. They say that mid-game is really about 45 onwards to 80, but you get the point. Early, mid, late as general units, where early is just a grind fest to get something functional, mid-game is a refinement of some kind of build, and late game is grinding content to perfect rolls on gear. Early game is pretty fun. You start scavenging for gear, learning what the unique bonuses do from the different items, putting something together on the fly, maybe playing with your cosmetics, and feeling the basic curve of power progression. It's enjoyable. At least it has been for me a couple of times, but you very quickly start running into problems. See, early game is genuinely fun. The story is good, the combat is good, the progression feels nice, and that sort of, ooh, a piece of candy mentality is really fresh on your mind, so you just feel good about playing. However, as soon as you get into mid-game, it throws you a curveball. For starters, you only have 4 stash tabs. This is interesting, and they will, of course, sell you stash tabs in the future, guaranteed for a price tag, in a $70 game that also has microtransactions, but I catch myself thinking, why don't I just play Path of Exile? At least there I can actually keep the gear I want to. Some people might say, oh, well, you're just nitpicking here, but no, I'm not. Diablo 4 has a lot of interesting gear. That's one of the best aspects of the game. I want to collect it. That's the purpose. That's the whole point of the game. But I can't really collect it because I don't have the space to collect it. All the gems, which don't have their own tab, funnily enough, take up a large chunk of my stash capacity, and this kind of terrible loot management extends to every facet of the game. There's no search function for the stash, like there is in Path of Exile. They doubled up and keep 2 of the most critical consumable items, of which you will want to hoard many of them, by the way, over the course of your playtime, those being elixirs and sigils, in the same sub-inventory slot, so you constantly have to play this mini-game of hot potato if you actually want to maintain a hoard of loot. And they don't have any sort of quick drop function, so if you ever get in the thick of it for a dungeon and need to make rapid decisions about inventory or what to carry, you can't even do that quickly because you have to drag things physically around like a moron with the inventory open. Now, for build functionality, I had a lot of fun, okay? It might be surprising to hear, but I did. For a bit. For a little bit. After that, I realized something. Why was I spending time trying to find creative ways to use this skill tree right here when I could have access to this one? Once again, the question loomed in my head, why don't I just play Path of Exile? To be fair, I like the Pantheon system in Diablo 4. It's interesting, it's fun to creep across the board, and the abundance of points can make it super satisfying to unlock secondary bonuses and piece together functional damage. But wait, no, because if you want to reset something significant way back in the tree towards actual endgame, you have to reset practically everything. Why would I play a game with less content, less convenience, less customization, and less quality of life for 10 times the price tag with less capacity to even keep the gear I find? That question was getting pretty hard for me to answer. Like I said, early game was fun because everything felt fresh and new, which is a completely intoxicating feeling for me as a video game player, likewise true for most other people out there. But when going through mid-game into end-game on my first character, the honeymoon phase ended unceremoniously. For example, there's a lot of basic components on the map organized nicely into their own little list on the side of your inventory. And at first, that's cool. The UI is not great, but it's fine. So there's components, whatever, big whoop. Because you don't really do any respecking or rolling. You don't see the significance here. You don't even pay attention to them. But as soon as you start, yeah, things get expensive. And a lot of those actual material types are just completely left behind. There's no point to them. It made me wonder, why am I playing this game when Path of Exile has an orb currency system tied directly into a massive crafting function where things always maintain value and practical usage in an economy that facilitates trade and cooperation? Yeah, Diablo 4 basically does not have a player economy. It's supposed to, it says it does, but it doesn't. That's fine for solo self-found fans or players, but for someone like me who loves trading with other players of the game and buying or selling in a player-driven economy of sorts, that sucks. Why would I play this game when it quite obviously is unfinished? I hope they make something functional to facilitate a player-driven economy, which doesn't really exist right now, but until they do, there's basically none of that. If we want to talk about general player cooperation, because the game is supposed to have MMO-type elements to it, it does exist in Diablo 4, it's just broken. The cooperation you find is boosting and leeching, because people can just enter an instance, have someone else kill the entire dungeon for them basically instantaneously, and get everything immediately. I'm not saying I don't want there to be some sort of motivation for higher level players to help out lower level ones, like that's all well and good, or some kind of power fantasy where you can get boosted a bit by your buddy who happens to have a badass build, but the total support of leeching and boosting is just way too far and doesn't make sense. This is like the basic framework of a game that just isn't complete yet. Maybe polished is a better word here, and that's okay, because it just came out. But is it okay, though? Is it really okay? It's a $70 game with microtransactions that you'll have to buy utility for, like stash tabs. Is that okay? Really? A good example of what I'm talking about is dungeon design. Basically, every dungeon is the same. Grab 2 or 3 things scattered around, or kill a set of monsters, unlock a door, go kill the main boss, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. Well, they split the things that you have to gather or kill or whatever it is into separate locations around the first part of the dungeon, but there's no map overlay. So you have to keep spam opening the map every couple of seconds to see where you've gone and where you have to go next. This results in a lot of backtracking. And yeah, it becomes second nature after a while to flash the map every 2 seconds, but just because I'm used to it doesn't make it good design. And I found myself asking, yet again, why don't I just go play Path of Exile? Most of these issues have already been ironed out in that game, and it's free! Another thing I just have to talk about is hardcore. I used to play hardcore in Path of Exile, and I wasn't amazing at it, okay? I was mediocre at best, but I did have fun. I could get characters into endgame with decent consistency, and maybe not do the crazy bosses or anything like that, but I was able to really engage with that system, and I found it to be pretty enjoyable. Not perfect, mind you, but it was enjoyable. Diablo 4 hardcore is trivialized completely. The existence of an elixir that cheats death, in combination with how it can be used and a few other mechanics in play here that I don't really need to discuss, that's just tedious, make hardcore basically a joke. Hardcore is supposed to be precisely that. No safety nets, no second chances. For anyone who wants a challenge of that type, why would you play Diablo 4 where you can basically have a perpetual second chance in hardcore when Path of Exile exists where hardcore is legitimately tense? And you don't get a constant second chance, which basically invalidates the concept of permadeath by existing. I don't know. Maybe some people disagree with that, and I'm not really going to die on that hill, per se. But I just don't see the logic. Endgame is there, but there's not a ton of it. A lot of the endgame feels rather pointless, and just to be sure, I've been chatting with some friends of mine who are much, much more dedicated to grinding the game than I am, who have all basically confirmed my thinking is correct, and they've maxed out multiple characters, etc., etc. So I'm not really qualified to speak on this, so I talked to them, and they are, and the game just gets boring after a while. That's the general consensus. This, to me, isn't as concerning as certain other things that I've already talked about. They will add more content over time. I'm not actually, broken up over that. Seasons will be a thing, but I just have to keep saying this. Why would you pay $70 for something that has broken and shallow components of its core gameplay loop when a completely free alternative called Path of Exile exists right now? There are a lot of recycled bosses. Map progression isn't shared across characters, which deflated me completely when I went to make my druid. I actually stepped away from the game for a bit when that happened because I was so annoyed about it. And this one took me a bit to understand, but once I figured it out, I had this aha moment, if you will. Because the way dynamic level scaling works, you actually hurt yourself if you don't level properly. That may sound stupid, but let me explain. Every time you level, monsters level with you. Going out and grinding a few levels on something that seems fairly easy at the time in order to get stronger for other content isn't really a thing, because you need to be slotting every point you get into tangible immediate bonuses, or else leveling actively hurts the power fantasy. I'm not kidding. It may be subtle at times, and I don't know, maybe I'm misunderstanding some of this or I had a bad experience, right? But level scaling, leveling up, actively hurts the power fantasy unless you put the points in the right places every time immediately with upgrades to gear alongside as you go. Now, sure, that may be fine for some people because they think that's the intended way to play, but I have this pattern personally where I like to grind something out for a while, get a bunch of loot, throw it in the stash, go sort it, check it out, sit in town, understand it all, figure out what's good, plug in upgrades, and then spend skill points. Nope, can't do that. When I try, I'm confronted by the fact that I don't have enough stash space to even do it. My character is weaker because I'm not doing enough constant incremental upgrades. Basically, I can't build outwards around a certain node, accomplishing a task over time the way that I want to, or I'll get weaker. And I have no search function, so the inventory portion of the game, even the skill tree portion of the game, is just tedious. Again, there's fun to be had for some players. I'm not going to dispute that. I'm just not really the one having that fun anymore. Learning the stats was fun. It genuinely was. I always enjoy that. But not everybody does, and it was fun until I discovered that vulnerability is a multiplicative damage type applied after other bonuses, thereby massively superior. It basically, any build that can't use vulnerability heavily is dead in the water. That was lucky for me because I happened to have used a couple different things that all heavily prioritized it on my first couple of characters. But man, my enthusiasm for the game was getting sapped really quickly after a certain point, and I can imagine that people that aren't as in tune with the stats kind of side of things are not really going to have a fun time when they realize how shallow this game actually is. ARPGs, for me at least, are about loot and unique character builds. I know that's not everyone, but I'm just talking about my subjective experience here. The loot gets repetitive fast in Diablo IV and doesn't even really have in-depth customization. Why wouldn't I just play Path of Exile, where I can basically take a piece of shit white item from anywhere and slowly turn it into the greatest thing ever with the customization and crafting? Why would I play a $70 game where it's quite literally tedious to look at and sort through the loot and inventory, while I can't store it anywhere because there's no stash capacity, when a free alternative simply doesn't have those problems? The builds, they start off cool until they're not, and I'm sure one day I'll circle back to Diablo IV and appreciate it when they iron out all the broken stuff, but for my playstyle, it just doesn't cut it for me. I could keep going about the different individual activities, or capstone dungeons, or renown, etc., and I'm sure the diehard fans will be upset that I haven't, because Helltide is super good, and yes, it is quite fun. Or, you're a scrub who doesn't understand the genius. Yes, I'm probably a scrub compared to some or most of you, but at the end of the day, if I'm looking at this game from my own unique individual perspective, and if I were forced to give it a numerical rating, I'd give it a go play Path of Exile out of 10. There's legitimately no reason that I see to purchase this game right now. In the end, people can and will, of course, enjoy Diablo IV. It's not for me to ridicule or shame anyone or say anything about that. I'm not saying you can't think that this game is amazing. There's plenty of things here that are well made and fun to play, but this shit's not ready yet. It just isn't. You can like what you like, and I won't make fun of anyone for it, but making this video just cemented the feeling right now as I say this and read the script that I don't have a reason to log in to Diablo 4. And what I really want to do now is go spin up Path of Exile because it's a better game. End of review. If you want to support the channel, please check out the links down below. There's a whole bunch of different things down there, but I won't stress about it. Thanks for watching, and have a nice night.